And now is the time in our service where we go into our meditation together. And today I really invite you to call forth the strength that you are, and that strength that you are that you use to navigate your way through fears and uncertainties that happen to pop into your life at various times. So let's just begin to enter into our meditation by just allowing yourself to just do what comes the most natural, just to breathe. The breaths don't have to be deep, they don't have to be forced, just allow them to flow naturally. Just plant your feet firmly on the floor, or if you're watching from home today, you may wish to lie on the floor, whatever feels the most comfortable for you. So today I ask you to imagine that the word strength is written on a piece of paper that's directly in front of you. And just really focus on how strong the word itself looks, strength. Now imagine that word leaping off of that piece of paper and entering in through the crown chakra, through the top of your head and into your body. You feel it as it moves its way through your shoulders and into your arms. You feel yourself growing stronger. Into your chest and your stomach, growing stronger still. Moving its way into your legs and just having that strength to root you firmly to the earth, just making you feel powerful. An indestructible force, that force that you are. Strength has moved into every cell of your body, not leaving room for not even one spot of fear to remain. Just allow it to flow through your cells and your veins, that strength that you are. Now imagine any of that fear that has left your body. Imagine that as a wall in front of you. A wall that's trying to make you feel uncertain, that's trying to make you doubt. And now, that strength that you are, you approach the wall. You put your hands out in front of you and you push it over. Using that strength to move that fear out of your way and to push it away from you. Stepping over that wall, stepping past that fear that has kept you where you are, kept you stuck for far too long. And as we prepare to move into our moment of silence, I invite you to just allow that strength to pulse through your body, just to feel it and feel how powerful it is and how powerful it feels, how powerful the true, authentic you is as we move into our moment of silence. And as we come back to this space in this room, we don't leave that strength behind in meditation. We carry that strength with us wherever we go. And I invite you here today to make a promise to yourself that those walls of fear, those walls of uncertainty, those walls of doubt, anything that is hindering any progress in your life, anything that's making you feel stuck, making you feel uncertain about where you're going or who you are, that you always refer back to that strength that you are, and you just reach out and you push that which keeps you stuck out of your way, because that power is within you, that power is you. And I just invite you to remember that today. I invite you to silently or out loud affirm after me, I am strength. And I am power. And so we allow it to be today. Namaste. I can't get past Pete with hair. And I have to say, I'm going to try to be serious up here and try not to laugh, especially looking at Ryan out there with that banana costume on. Just kidding. So I'm going to try to be as serious as I can. But anyway, it's Halloween. How often does Halloween fall on a Sunday? So we might as well have some fun with it, right? So I'm Reverend Evin. I think I've met most everybody in the room, but if not, please come up and say hi after. I'd like to meet you. And anybody that's watching us online, hopefully you're wearing a costume too, so you can join in on the fun. Just because you're at home doesn't mean you can't. But, so happy Halloween. Is anybody preparing for a spooky night tonight? Even if it's just hanging out at home? Yeah, there we go. We've got some. Yeah? We've got old Black Joe over here wearing his, I'm not real sure exactly what it is. I want to say like a sphinx or something, but it's cool. I like it. But so probably anybody, a lot of you probably know by now, and if you don't, but I'm a paranormal investigator in real life, not just in my costume. So I'm a real life ghost hunter. But as you can imagine, I've met some very interesting people along that line of work that I've done. I've learned quite a bit too, and one of the things that I've learned is that it's said, and you don't even have to be a paranormal investigator or a ghost hunter to know this, but it's said that Halloween is when the veil between our world and the spiritual world is the thinnest. That's pretty spooky, huh? Ooh, depending on how you look at it. Now, I've had some pretty spooky experiences as a ghost hunter. I've witnessed a table move on its own. I've heard voices that weren't supposed to be there. I've been touched by the unseen. And I even felt a whisper in my ear at one point. That one really scared me. But I've even been in a house where we did an investigation where the energy was so strong that it actually gave me a fever and cold-like symptoms, and I had to spend 2 days in bed after that one because the energy was so thick. But as a child, I lived in a house where my sister and my mother and we all had experiences. Of course, it wouldn't have happened to my father because, of course, he's the skeptic of the family, so he never had anything, at least not that he told us. That's kind of more what I'm thinking. But one of the things that I remember most vividly about that house is one specific night, and I'm not sure how old I was. I'd say maybe I was about 10 years old or so. But my mother used to sit at our dining room table and she would cut coupons. And sometimes she would do this toward the end of the evening and she was ready to go to bed, so she would just kind of stack them up there on the table and just leave them there until the next morning or the next day when she would put them up. But so one night I wake up and I hear the coupons being shuffled around on the table. Like papers are just being shuffled. And I initially didn't think much of it, as a child. I just figured it was my mother in there doing something, but then it hits me, it's the middle of the night and the house is completely dark. There's no light coming in from anywhere. So I remember sitting up in bed and I'm like, okay, am I still hearing this? Am I truly awake? And I still hear it. So I did what most kids would do. I flung myself back down in my bed and pulled the covers up over my head. And it went on for what seemed like a very long time. But eventually, I fell back asleep. And I remember waking up early that morning and I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to walk out in there and all of those coupons and all that paper is going to be on the floor. Nope, they're still stacked neatly right where they were when we went to bed. And I didn't tell my parents about this, but I did tell my sister. And she and I talked, and we had both found out that we had had experiences. And so as time went on, we would share our experiences with each other. Now, I have to say that this wasn't the last time that kind of thing happened. It happened again even without the coupons being there. Then, of course, there were other experiences too, that I experienced in that house. And my mother eventually shared some of her own as we got older. But after a while, I grew older, and I learned that whatever it was in the house wasn't anything that was going to hurt me. And began to accept that it was just a natural part of living in that house. And I'd even actually seen it a couple of times as I got older, but I learned to not be frightened. And I'd moved into a phase of acceptance. So this week is week 6 of our book study, the Book of Joy. And of course, there's one chapter that caught my attention. Can anybody guess which one it is? There's a chapter titled Acceptance, the only place where change can begin. So this chapter starts out talking about some of the quotes that the Dalai Lama had placed on a wall in a Tibetan children's village. And one of the quotes said, "Why be unhappy about something if it can be remedied? And what is the use of being unhappy if it cannot be remedied?" Now, back in the first week of our book study, we read about how the Dalai Lama had been exiled from his home country, never to be able to return back home again. And about how despite that exile, he's not walking around in this state of unhappiness. The book mentions morose. He's not walking around just in that state. Or he's not walking around expecting pity. Now the book says once we can see its wider perspective, once we are able to see our role in its drama with some degree of humility, and once we are able to laugh at ourselves, we then come to the fourth and final quality of mind, which is the ability to accept our life in all its pain, imperfection, and beauty. So I've had more than one person ask me, when I tell them stories about the house I grew up in, they're like, well, weren't you afraid? Well, sure, at first. But in this instance, perspective became everything. I could have looked at it from the perspective that it was some nefarious ghost or spirit that was trying to frighten me. Yeah, I could have walked around thinking that. I could have continued to pull the covers over my head anytime I heard a sound. Or I could start to look at it in a different way, perhaps from a different perspective. Maybe it was someone who had lived in that land long before me, simply just wanting to reach out and to coexist and to let me know, hey, I'm here too. At that point, I was able to just accept those experiences as a part of my life and to just move forward. But acceptance in our lives doesn't always come in the form of living in a haunted house, does it? We sometimes experience illnesses in our lives. Loss of relationships, loss of jobs, the loss of losing people that we love and care about, pets that we love and care about to the spiritual realm. Those things don't always widely fling open a door welcoming us in such a joyful manner, do they? Sometimes they catch us completely off guard, and in those moments we're feeling anything but joy. But Archbishop Tutu invites us to look at things from a different perspective. He says we are meant to live in joy. This does not mean that life will be easy or painless. It means that we can turn our faces to the wind and accept that this is the storm we must pass through. Now he then says something that I do want to focus on for just a bit here. He says we cannot succeed by denying what exists. Now, I've seen some confusion around this here at Unity. I've heard discussions about this. Someone goes to the doctor and receives a diagnosis. Well, Evan, they may say, remember when Myrtle Fillmore heard the words, I am a child of God, therefore I do not inherit sickness? Does this mean that my body doesn't really have an illness? Does it mean that I should deny the diagnosis? Of course not. But this is when we go back to what's true. What's true in this instance is that you, the true you, the spiritual you, cannot inherit sickness or illness. That part of you is what has, the body part of you is what has received the diagnosis, not the true spiritual you. The body, the physical body, has received the diagnosis. So it doesn't mean that we deny it. It doesn't mean that we ignore it. It doesn't mean that you aren't practicing unity or other spiritual tools and principles when you pay attention to the diagnosis given to the body. Now, this is where Archbishop Tutu adds more to the equation. He says the acceptance of reality is the only place from which change can begin. So sometimes we walk a particular road in life. We take a specific journey. Sometimes we make a pit stop at a specific spot along the road, or we take a detour, if you will. Whether it's a choice we made before we entered this lifetime, whether it's a choice we made at some point during this lifetime, or whether it's something we must be made to face for something that we are to learn during this lifetime. I can't say because I honestly don't know the answer with 100% certainty. I just know that sometimes it feels like we practice our principles. I just know that sometimes we do the spiritual dance, yet life still happens. And it sometimes happens in ways that don't always feel quite so pleasant, right? There are things that happen in life that sometimes do seem out of our control. Remember that song by Alanis Morissette, Isn't It Ironic? Actually, when I thought of that song, I had to blast it at home. Mindy's like, is that Alanis Morissette? But some of the song mentions, it says, an old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day. It's a black fly in your Chardonnay. It's a death row pardon 2 minutes too late. And she goes on, well, life has a funny way of sneaking up on you when you think everything's okay and everything's going right. And life has a funny way of helping you out when you think everything's gone wrong and everything blows up in your face. Now, the Dalai Lama tells us that stress and anxiety come from our expectations of how life should be. So in my opinion, there's no truer words have ever been spoken. So maybe sometimes the what that is happening isn't always the most important part of the equation. Maybe it's more instead the how we move through it that matters the most. And he goes on to say in the book, he says, so many causes of suffering come from our reacting to the people, places, things, and circumstances in our lives rather than accepting them. When we react, we stay locked in judgment and criticism, anxiety and despair, even denial and addiction. It is impossible to experience joy when we are stuck this way. Acceptance is the sword that cuts through all of this resistance, allowing us to relax, to see clearly, and to respond appropriately. Again, I feel, my opinion is that all of that is true. And I think we know that on a deeper level, but how? How do we move into the acceptance that they talk about? As I mentioned earlier, it's not always as simple as finding that you're sharing a home with a friendly ghost. Sometimes it's something far more. But the first step of acceptance is something that may initially just catch you completely off guard. It's a complete opposite of denial. It is admitting that something feels difficult. It's admitting that it hurts. Admitting that it's painful and that the pain you are experiencing in that moment is real. Next, it's letting go. It's letting go of the way we think things should be. The book tells us our responsibility is to pursue the goal with all the dedication we can muster. Do the best we can, but not become fixated on a preconceived notion as a result. And what is the goal here? The goal is to live our lives in the best way we can. To show up as love in the best ways that we can. And to experience joy in the best ways that we can. And I did want to read something from the book to you. And if you have the book and want to read it later, if you've got the smaller print book, it's page 227, the last paragraph. It says, life is constantly unpredictable, uncontrollable, and often quite challenging. Edith Eva Eger explained that life in a concentration camp was an endless selection line where one never knew whether one would live or die. The only thing that kept a person alive was the acceptance of the reality of one's existence and the attempt to respond as best one could. Curiosity about what would happen next, even when she was left for dead in a pile of bodies, was often all she had to pull herself forward to the next breath. When we accept what is happening now, we can be curious about what might happen next. So life is likely going to always continuously throw us those haunted curveballs. Whether you find yourself living in a haunted house or something far different, life is going to continue to throw them. We'll have a decision to make when those curveballs come or those ghosts cross our paths. We can choose to run in fright from the haunted house or become angry that it's even haunted in the first place. Or we can take a moment to just breathe. A moment to ask the ghost maybe why it's even there. Is it there to frighten? Oftentimes, Lord tells us that ghosts are there to warn us of something, to let us know something, maybe even to share a message. But the one thing we can do, that we can learn to do, is to coexist and to learn to have joy and to experience joy despite the ghost in the house. Because it's in that acceptance where we find freedom, and then in acceptance where we find joy. Namaste. All right, and now